Show you today how to make a completely plant-based and dairy-free spanakopita with your very own handmade phyllo dough. So a spanakopita comprises of the filling, which is a spinach, herb and feta filling, and then coated in a phyllo dough. Now phyllo actually means leaf because it is so thin. We have lots of sheets of phyllo to create crunchy layers, like either butter or olive oil is brushed in between the layers that gives it that iconic crunchy and flaky dough. But before we get started, the first thing that we need to prepare is our feta. Now we're making a dairy-free feta today, and I wanted to use ingredients which are very common here in the Mediterranean. Now today we are making phyllo dough from scratch. Don't be scared, I'm going to go through all the steps now. Our wheat flour, I'm using an 11% protein content. So that's kind of like an all-purpose flour or somewhere between an all-purpose and a bread flour. But the best way to know the protein content of your flour, just check the back in the nutritional information and it will give you the percentage. So per 100 grams, it'll say like 10% or 11% or 12%, and you can determine which flour will be the best for this recipe. So I've gone ahead and weighed that out. We also have some salt and some extra virgin olive oil. So I'm going to add these all to my stand mixer. Now you can make this by hand, and I will leave some notes in your recipe of how you can do that as well. My flour, our olive oil, and our salt. So we're just going to pop all of those onto our mixer and mix those for a few minutes until they're incorporated. So I've just got my hot water from the tap. I'm just going to measure the temperature. I'm going to measure what I need for this recipe. So now I'm going to slowly start incorporating my warm water. Don't be tempted to add a lot of flour to this dough. We do want it to be very soft so we can get that maximum stretchability and get a nice thin dough when we roll it out. Using warm water is going to start pre-gelatinizing the starches in the wheat flour, which is going to allow more extendability. So when we start stretching our dough, we're going to get a nice extendable dough that can become very, very thin for our phyllo. Okay, now once everything's come together, we're going to increase it to either a speed 2 or 3 and knead it for about 10 to 15 minutes or until we get a nice elastic dough and we can do a window test. So let's take our dough out so we can take a better look at it. So I can see that it's starting to get some good gluten development. Now I'm just going to pop this into a bowl and cover it with some olive oil. And we're just going to wrap it in some cling wrap and set that aside for 2 hours to completely rest. All right, so let's rest that for 2 hours. Now traditionally, spanakopita here in Greece contains spinach, but also a lot of herbs as well. So the main ingredient, of course, is spinach, and I'm using, I think they call it like true spinach. I know around the world, you may not be able to get this type of spinach. If you can't get it, you can use like the silver beet or a mixture of like silver beet and like the baby spinach leaves. You do need to make sure that you wash them really well, and you'll see I've put a little video of me washing it earlier. It's best to get like a big sink or tub of water and really get all of that dirt and sand out, because we don't want all that hard work wasted with a sandy Spanakopita. So we have all of our spinach here. We also use some different varieties of onions. So we have like a yellow or a white onion. We have some leeks as well. And we also have some lovely spring onions, okay? And then for our herbs today, we're using some mint, parsley, and dill. And you can use any quantities of those that you like. I'm gonna do some recommendations in the recipe for you, but I'm gonna go ahead and start trimming these and cutting everything up. And just toss that into a large bowl. Now I'm gonna start weighing all of this as well, so I get the right amount that I need for my recipe. So now I've got all my spinach chopped up. We're gonna add the salt. Now it's gonna seem like a lot of salt, but don't worry, this is actually gonna help dry out all that additional moisture from the spinach, which we're gonna drain out later. So just toss that through, give it a little bit of a massage, and then we're gonna cover this and set this aside for 2 hours, like 1.5 to 2 hours. Now just go ahead and slice up all your onions. I've just taken my leeks and sliced them down the center and made sure that I gave them a good wash. We're gonna finely slice these along with our white onions and spring onions. So our pile's getting small. I'm gonna go in with our herbs now, and now in a separate bowl, we're gonna put all of our herbs and just chop them nice and fine. We've got a nice big bunch of dill here, very popular in a lot of Greek cuisine. So we're gonna put quite a bit of that in there too. So the interesting thing about the mint here in Greece is it's more of like a spearmint flavor. It has kind of like some sweet notes to it, but it's very delicious and they use it a lot in savory cooking. So we have our onions cooked up, our herbs chopped, we have our egg replacement, which we're going to mix up shortly. But we have had our spinach marinating with the salt for 2 hours to draw out as much moisture as possible, because we really want to control the moisture in this filling. It's very important. We don't want to have a soggy pastry, so we really want to control that moisture content. Now you can go ahead and just use a lint-free cloth, or you can use a nut milk bag or some cheesecloth to wring out all that moisture. I'm just going to use some gloves because this can get a bit messy. And I'm just going to add my spinach to those onions. I'm just doing it in batches just so it's a bit easier. I've probably got, quite a lot. As you can see, there's quite a lot of liquid there. So it is very important to do this step. And our egg replacer for this recipe. So traditionally in a Spanakopita, you would have eggs just to help hold everything together. So the main objective of the egg replacer is binding. And I'm just using some potato starch today. Now, I'd recommend that you use potato starch if you can get access to it. If not, you can use cornstarch. So we're just gonna mix the potato starch with some water just to create like a slurry. Spanakopita heats up, it will thicken and hold everything together. Probably easier just to get in there with your hands, give everything a nice good mix. Now during the Lent time when they're not consuming dairy, they would just make a version of this Spanakopita but without the feta. So it would just be essentially this mixture here without the feta. But the feta just makes it taste delicious, so we're definitely going to be adding that. And I have my blocks of feta here. And I'm making a very large recipe, so I'm using 2 blocks of our vegan feta. And as you can see, it's firmed up now, and I'm just going to break it open so you can see inside. See how it crumbles? So I kind of like to make chunks of it, so you get nice chunks throughout your spanakopita. And we're just going to fold everything through. So we've got all our ingredients ready to go. We've got the filling and I have the dough. So all we have to do now is stretch out our dough and get making our spanakopita. So now we have our filling and our dough has had enough time to rest. We can start assembling our spanakopita. Now to do that, we're going to have to stretch out our dough. And I like to just grab myself either a clean bed sheet or you can use a tablecloth. And we're going to put that all over our table. And I like to just go over my sheet with a lint roller. I can't find the handle to mine, but you get the idea, just to make sure that it's super clean before we stretch out our dough. Now to prevent our dough from sticking, I like to use rice flour. I find that it really helps to prevent the dough from getting sticky and you don't need to use a lot of it. So I've just sifted some over and I'm just spreading it out just to make sure we get a nice even layer. And I've just got one ball of my dough. We're gonna get this onto our cloth. Put some of that rice flour on top. And we're going to start rolling out our dough as thin as we possibly can, starting from the center and rolling out. Okay, so once you've got it as thin as you can, I've got mine to about 1 millimeter thickness. Just take your time with it. We are going to brush over some olive oil. Now the fun part, we're going to start stretching out our dough super thin so we can read a newspaper through it. To do that, we want to make sure that we have our nails trimmed so we're not going to poke any holes through. And we're going to gently go underneath our dough. And start pulling from the center out. And you really want to feel the resistance of the dough. If it's not allowing you to pull anymore, or it's starting to get very taut, just stop and go to another spot or let the dough rest. Yeah, so I've got it about 80 centimeters by 80 centimeters. If yours can't stretch as much as mine, don't worry too much. Just make sure you let it rest while you're pulling the dough if you're getting a little bit of resistance, and just take your time. And we are going to start putting this along our pastry. Now, what I like to do is create like about a 40 centimeter log, about 10 centimeters away from the edge, okay? So we'll start in the center. Now we want to flatten it down about an inch thick or so. And it's about 10 centimeters wide, or around 3 inches. Now any of those really thick edges, so maybe like 5, 6, 7 millimeters along the edge, we're going to trim off. And I like to use a pizza cutter. We just don't want any thick, tough pieces of our phyllo dough. So you can just go around the edge there. Now the first thing that we're going to do is carefully fold over this edge that we left the gap over our pastry. Don't worry if it doesn't go all the way over. Now we're going to take this side and fold that part over. And we're sort of wanting to meet the pastry up in the center as best we can. I'm just stretching out the dough a little bit so it's going to match up with our roll. And now we're going to brush over with a little more olive oil, just gently. This is going to create all those beautiful flaky layers. So now we're going to start rolling everything up, and we're going to use the cloth to help us do that. So we want to pick up the cloth and just carefully flip this over. Just make sure our dough is going to match up. And again. Perfect. So now I'm just going to trim that edge there. Perfect. So now we have our lovely Spanakopita. I'm going to get this onto a tray. So I've just got myself a large sheet pan, or you can just use the largest tray that you have. And I've just lined it with some baking paper. And if you do have an air mat, these are great for using for pastries. It's going to give nice, even baking all the way through. So underneath you're going to get nice and crispy as well. And I always like to just brush just a tiny bit of the olive oil as well on the base, just to ensure it won't stick. Now we're going to carefully take our Spanakopita. We're going to brush over with our remaining oil. All right, so this is all ready to go into our preheated oven. I have it set to 180 degrees Celsius with the fan. And we're going to bake it for about 25 minutes and then have a check. And if you would like, you can also put the vegan egg wash on top, which will give it an even deeper golden. It's not traditional, but I think it gives a really lovely color and finish. So we're going to get this going in now and start baking. Now it's looking gorgeous. I've had it in for 25 minutes. Now at this stage, if you do want it to have like a really nice golden crust, you can add a little bit of plant-based egg wash. And all this is 1 part maple syrup to 10 parts soy milk. And I'm just gonna brush this over the top. And it's just gonna give it a beautiful sheen and golden color. Make sure you get around the sides. Okay, so I'm gonna pop this back in now for anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes, just depending on your oven. Just keep an eye on it until it's nice and golden. So we have our Spanakopita just come out of the oven. It's beautiful and golden. Now, if you're going to enjoy this right away, I would highly recommend to allow it to cool down for at least 10 to 15 minutes before you cut into it, just so the inside has a little bit more time to set up. But it's beautiful and crispy. So we have our beautiful Spanakopita. So I always like to make this in advance, so when I come to serve it, I can just cut up a piece or take a piece out of a container and crisp it back up. So I'm actually going to portion this out now. And you will notice after you bake it, when it cools down, the pastry will become a little more soft. So I really love to do it this way. So making it ahead of time, and then you can crisp it back up in the oven. So I'm going to portion this into 5 equal pieces, or about 8 centimeters each. You see all those gorgeous layers inside. So I'm going to I've just cut 3 pieces because I'm just going to serve 3 pieces at the moment. Pop them onto a tray. Now my Spanakopita is slightly warm, still at room temperature, so I need to put it in the oven for about 7 minutes, but if you are taking it straight out from the fridge, I'd recommend to reheat it for about 10 to 12 minutes. And any leftover that you are not using right away, you can store in a container for up to 4 to 5 days. And just when you're ready to serve, take it out, slice your portions and heat it up in the oven. So our Spanakopita has just come out of the oven and it's lovely and crunchy. Can you hear that? Perfect to serve right away. And there we have it, guys. That's our vegan, dairy-free Spanakopita.